Hey, I'm Big J and I'm here tonight to talk with you about fantasy football. It is Thursday, September 25th, 2014, which means it is the start of week 4. And tonight we got a great game on the slate. New York Giants at the Washington Redskins. Tonight, let's first look at the running backs. Rashad Jennings and Alfred Morris both are studs regardless of format. Both guys you're starting, and you know what? There's no concerns about these guys. Jennings is not going to be losing touches to Williams, and Morris will lose a couple touches to Roy Halou, but really only in the 2-minute offense. That's times when the Redskins are trailing by more than 14 or times within either 2-minute warning. I'm not too concerned about that. He's not a PPR back to begin with. And you know what? Even so, you're starting him in a PPR league because he's just that good. Let's now look at Kirk Cousins, a guy who has surpassed any expectations, I think, from any of us in the fantasy realm. You know, you heard all the chatter in the offseason about how he is the better quarterback than RG3. And you know what? All he's done is come out and prove that, you know what, he might be. To me, if you lost RG3 and he was your starting quarterback, Kirk Cousins is a guy you can plug and play without any fear. And Garcon, Jackson, and who's ever playing tight end, which tonight will be Niles Paul, will all benefit from Kirk Cousins being the quarterback. I think since Kirk Cousins is a pocket passer, whereas RG3, who scrambles and runs the ball a little bit more of the yards now are going to be generated just through the regular passing game and now through Alfred Morris. I think really all of the skill positions on the Washington Redskins benefit from this quarterback change. If you're going to make the argument about who's the better NFL quarterback, it's tougher to say, but when it comes from a fantasy perspective, I'm definitely happy that Kirk Cousins is at the helm tonight. Let's briefly talk about Eli Manning. Which Eli will we see? Obviously, he had a great game against Houston last week, and Cruz went off as well, but I worry about Eli Manning from a fantasy perspective. I don't see him stacking up the yards. I see him maybe good for a touchdown every game. But you're going to have consistencies. You're not going to have him scoring a touchdown every game like you see from Drew Brees or Peyton Manning or these other really stud quarterbacks in the league. That being said, let's look a little bit at his wide receivers. Cruz had a great game last week, and as long as Manning can get up above 250 passing yards, let's say, I think Cruz will be down to have an 80-yard game and always a chance for a touchdown as long as Manning's throwing one, which can be a big if. Let's move on to Sunday here. Green Bay at Chicago is the first game I have highlighted. And I have this game highlighted because these two great running backs for both of these teams have really underproduced this season. Matt Forte really has not broken out yet, but has had all right stats. On Sunday, I look for him to really break out against this Green Bay line. And, you know, with Marshall and Jeffries nicked up, I think it would be smart for the Bears to run through Matt Forte this week. Eddie Lacy, a guy who's been very, very disappointing through the first 3 games. Granted, the first game he suffered an injury and was actually looking pretty good against the Seahawks. But man, against Detroit and against the Jets, this guy has not been looking good, especially against Detroit with the safety and the fumble return for a touchdown. You know what? Both of those plays, they happen to running backs. The safety, he gets met 5 yards deep in the end zone. What are you going to do? It happens. You know, a good running back maybe takes a different lane. He manages to get out of there, maybe no gain, maybe a half-yard gain. You know, it's a battle of inches, this game. And in this case, Eddie Lacy turned out on the wrong side. The fumble, it happens. It happens to all running backs. It happens to all players. This was his first fumble in some 350 touches. I'm not concerned. I think Eddie Lacy rebounds. I think he is a guy you're obviously starting every week. I wouldn't bail on Eddie Lacy quite yet. Give him another couple weeks just to evaluate him. Let's move on to Detroit at the New York Jets. This is a very interesting game for a couple reasons. Number one, Matthew Stafford had an awful game last week. I expect him here to rebound. This New York Jets defense, while it is good, its weakness is absolutely its secondary. I don't think that the Lions are going to be able to run the ball against the Jets. I expect Stafford to have a good game. I expect Johnson to have a big game. I also expect, even Golden Tate to have a big game. I do worry about those tight ends. I do not think Ebron is there yet. You know, if you took a chance early in the draft on Ebron, I'm not liking him so much, but do expect Stafford to rebound. And then it's the battle of backup running backs this week with Chris Ivory and Joyt Bell. Obviously, Joyt Bell It's a little bit it's a little bit of concern because of the way that you saw Reggie Bush last week. He just had a great week. He was catching the ball more if you're in a PPR league, and even in a standard league, it looks like Bush is going to be the guy there. Although I still think Bell is a good player to have on your roster. I would not start him this week against the New York Jets' excellent defensive line. A guy to look for later in the season, maybe after Bush has an injury or once these running lanes get opened up a little bit better. However, Chris Ivory, on the other hand, is a great start this week. While the matchup is not ideal, and Detroit does have a great defensive line, I think he is by far the best looking back in New York. I'm a New York Jets fan myself, somewhat ashamed to say, but man, has Ivory ever looked good. He looks way better than Johnson right now. Even Powell looks better than Johnson at this point, but Ivory is running hard. He's keeping his balance. He's hitting the hole fast. He's even making plays in the passing game, which has been his one real criticism up to this point in his career. I like Ivory, buy him low. He's on the waiver wire in many leagues. He's a free agent in probably almost 40% of leagues, I'm guessing. He's a guy you want to look for, even this week against that tough matchup. And finally, let's move on to New Orleans at Dallas. It should be a high-scoring affair. That's what everyone's been saying. Of course, it was last year with New Orleans blowing out Dallas. Dallas much improved this year. New Orleans without Mark Ingram, expect Kirby and Thomas to be getting the looks, obviously. I like Kirby better in a standard format. I like Thomas much better in a PPR. Thomas has not been a great PPR back this season. He just hasn't had the receptions yet. It'll come. It'll happen. Even if without Mark Ingram in the lineup, it's more likely to happen. Even when Ingram comes back, I still expect Thomas to see the majority of catches. Don't give up on him yet. He's a good player. Let's look next to the New Orleans wide receivers. You have Brandon Cooks and Marcus Colston. Who's going to be the number one guy? Well, obviously it's Jimmy Graham. But when it comes to the wide receivers, you don't know. Brandon Cooks, much more of a possession wide receiver. I like him more in PPR leagues. Whereas I like Marcus Colston always a little bit more for the touchdowns. He just has that chemistry with Drew Brees. They've had so many touchdowns in between the two of them. I still like Marcus Colston in PPR or in standard leagues, despite his slow start this season. And then Tony Romo obviously has not lived up to expectations. I expect a better game, just because he's probably going to have to be scoring points against the Saints. Obviously, Des Bryant has not been a disappointment. Obviously, DeMarco Murray has not been a disappointment. But with Romo's stats and yards being down, it's really hurt Jason Witten. It's hurt, what is his name? Terrence Williams, I think his name is, the second wide receiver there in Dallas. I look this week to hopefully see that passing game rebound, but I want them to stay with Murray. I think running the ball with Murray has been very successful this team. It's something they should have been doing for a long time because Murray is a stud. He's a great back, and as long as he can stay healthy, he's gold. He's absolutely gold. You were so fortunate to pick him up in the late first or second round, wherever you managed to get this guy. You are going to love having him on your fantasy team. Anyway, I'm signing out. 8:30. I'll try to do better next time. Keep these videos a little shorter. Anyway, Big J signing out.